The road into Greyhaven always looked smaller at night, as if the town drew in on itself and tucked away whatever life spilled onto its streets during the day. Claire knew this road better than most. Summers spent at her grandmother's house had taught her the creak of the harbor, the smell of salt, and the way gulls argued over the last of last year's crabs. But she had never walked the lane after the fog rolled in the way it had tonight, thick and low, swallowing the street lamps as though they were tiny candles dropped into a bowl of milk. She had come only to fetch a box, an old trunk of her grandmother's things, from the attic of the weatherboard house on Ledge Road. The house had been empty for months, the windows shuttered, the porch swing hanging frozen in the same creek. People said her grandmother had always liked the place because it let the wind tell stories. Claire believed it then. She believed it less now. On the narrow lane, fog clung to her jacket. Her breath puffed in short white clouds. The trunk was heavier than she'd expected, the leather straps stiff and complaining under her hands. Twice she had almost set it down and turned back, thinking of the warm apartment a block away, the kettle she could boil, the bed that wouldn't creak. Each time, guilt pulled her forward, the promise to clean out the house and put it on the market to stop avoiding memories packed in cedar and dust. She reached the porch as a bell, or a metal thing that sounded like a bell, chimed in the fog. It might even have been her own nerves. The door sighed open before she could lift the knocker. "Grandma?" Claire called into the dim foyer. The house swallowed her voice and kept its silence. Faded wallpaper curled like peeled bark. There were pictures pushed toward the wall, faces half hidden by dust. The air smelled faintly of dried lavender and something else, something metallic, like a blood scent in a closet. She shifted the trunk and the stair beneath her foot moaned. The house had always been alive with small sounds. Tonight, every sound seemed to carry intention. She hauled the trunk into the hall and set it down by the parlor door. For a moment she stood listening, as if listening could tell her which room to start in, which thing to touch first without waking something she didn't want to wake. A soft tapping began from the attic. Once, twice. Not the slow settling of an old house, but steady, like fingernails on a wooden box. Claire's throat tightened. She told herself it was just the wind. The house had many odd noises. That was what made it home. Curiosity pushed her upstairs. The attic hatch stuck a little, then gave. Dust fell in a soft cloud. As Claire climbed, the floorboards remembered her weight and creaked a long, familial chant. The attic was a small cathedral of trunks and boxes, shafts of gray light slicing through slats. The trunk she'd carried sat near an old rocking chair, its metal clasp crusted with age. Someone, she could not tell whether it was memory or thoughts, had drawn a crooked line across a trunk lid in faint charcoal. "Don't look under the ledge." She laughed at herself then, a sound with too much breath. Her fingers brushed the lid and the key clicked free easily. Old letters, a moth-eaten scarf, a handful of coins tumbled onto her lap. At the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, was a wooden box smaller than her hand. Cold hummed from it like a held breath. When she lifted the lid, a card lay inside, brittle as autumn. A small note in her grandmother's handwriting that read only, "Forgive the hollow." "Close it, Claire. Close it good." Her skin went cold. She had never known her grandmother to be unsteady. The house seemed to hold its breath around her. A sound came, low and distant at first, a scraping, like someone pulling something heavy across the outside wall beneath the house. Claire peered through a narrow attic window. The fog had thickened. It glowed with pearlescent light, as if the street beyond had turned into the inside of a glowing shell. Something moved at the edge of the yard, a small shadow lengthening and drawing toward the foundation like an oil stain seeping under a door. The second time the scratch sounded, it was right below the attic floor, where the beams met the sill. The house hummed there, in the bones. Claire told herself to be brave. She carried the little box downstairs to the kitchen and set it on the worn table. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, patient and uncaring. Claire could still see her reflection in the black glass of the oven door. hunched shoulders, a smear of dust across one cheek, wide eyes that didn't look like her own. That's when something hit the window. A dull thump, a muffled impact like the body of a falling tree or a hand. Tap, 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 closer. It moved across the glass, reading the outside of the house as if tracing a map. Claire stood frozen, palms on the cool table. She wanted to call out, wanted someone to say it was late and that she should leave. Instead, she heard footsteps in the hall outside the kitchen, and the door creaked a fraction. "No," she whispered, "not tonight." The footsteps didn't stop. They were too light for the clumsy gait of town kids. They moved in a rhythm that slid under her skin. A shadow fell across the doorway, slow, deliberate. When the shadow resolved, the shape pressed there did not look like a person. Limbs too long, shoulders that bent at the wrong angle. And eyes, when they opened, were not eyes so much as two pinpricks of red light through the fog beyond the glass. It did not speak. It did not need to. The thing beneath the ledge knew exactly who had let it into the house. It padded toward her, making a sound like dry leaves rasping together. Claire backed away without knowing it, her heels scraping the scuffed floor. The little wooden box in the center of the table throbbed like a second heart, warmth seeping from it in waves. Her grandmother had written close at Claire. The words tasted like a warning that had been said and not heard. Claire summoned rage at herself for being afraid. She lifted the box and, without thinking of the breath it might provoke, flipped the lid shut. The scraping outside the kitchen window stilled as if the house had been given notice. The air calmed into a brittle, waiting silence. Claire exhaled, and in that exhale heard a whisper so soft it could have been the wallpaper loosening itself. "Not yet," it said, not with voice, but with the warmth of a presence, the pressure of something leaning near. The shadow before the doorway drew a little closer, stopping just at the threshold. For a beat. One thin, impossible beat. Claire understood it was not interested in the trunk, in the boxes, or even in her. It had been waiting for the house to forget there was a lid that could close. She remembered the carved words on the trunk in the attic. "Don't look under the ledge." The phrase felt childish now, but the fear behind it was not. Claire took a step forward, then another. Her palms felt slick. The shadow watched her as a cat might watch a toy. It was precise and patient and entire in its focus. On some level, she knew what the hollow was. A place beneath the house where something slept between the foundation stones, something that had been kept patient by routine and by the presence of a wooden lid. Perhaps it had once been forgotten and had crawled toward the light of anyone who would make a sound. Perhaps it had been fed for years by the town's careless nights. She could not say. She only knew that whatever it had been called was awake now because she had opened one small box. The thing in the doorway stretched, and for a moment Claire thought it would laugh like a child. Instead, a sound came from it that was older than laughter, a scraping tone that filled the kitchen and traveled up into her teeth. The little wooden box shook in her hands. "Please," Claire said aloud, though to whom she did not know. Then the thing spoke, finally. Not with language, but with a memory pressed into her mind like smooth stones, hunger and cold, years measured not in calendars but in the slow erosion of floorboards, the taste of dust and regret. Claire felt it, a loneliness so sharp it felt like an animal. She thought then of her grandmother tucking a quilt around a child, of hands knotting bread dough, of the ways people tried to fix what could not be mended. The creature leaned forward, a smile that was the shadow of teeth. "You closed me once," it told her. The voice was the wind in a bottle. "You told us to be quiet so you could sleep." It reached an impossibly long, thin hand toward her, stopping inches from the wood of the box. Claire did not think. She moved by an instinct older and stranger than fear. She swung the lid open again. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth beneath the note, lay a small stone, dark and smooth and carved with a spiral. The stone hummed. She remembered a story her grandmother once told. If you put your palm on a wound and say the name of the thing that hurts, the hurt will fold. Her hands trembled, but she set the stone at the edge of the table and placed the box over it like a hat. It fit snugly. The shadow before the door jerked as though struck. It hissed and pulled back, a sound like straw caught in a wind. The house shuddered, and in the parlor the pictures on the wall gave a thin sigh, like leaves falling off a branch. Claire pressed her palm on the lid and felt warmth under the wood, another pulse migrating from the stone into her skin. It was then she understood. The stone was not a weapon. It was a promise, a small old kind of covenant. Her grandmother had kept it because she knew how things could wake. She had written the note in the hand of someone who had known how quickly small things could become large. The shadow retreated to the threshold and then flattened itself along the foundation, like oil soaking back under a floorboard. For now, it had been turned from the doorway. For now, it had been told there would be no easy meal here. Sat on the chair until dawn, her forehead against her knees, the trunk open on the floor and the little stone safe under the box. Outside, the night loosened and slipped. The gulls woke early and argued over nothing, far away where the harbor rubbed its fingers. When she finally rose, the house was bright with a cold, honest light. The attic felt like a room that had been given a second chance. Claire wrapped the stone in oilcloth again, tied it with a ribbon, and wrote a new note in the margin of her grandmother's letter. Keep it closed. Remember the ledge. She put the trunk by the door and locked it. She did not know what the thing under the ledge would do the next time a foolish person left a window cracked in fog. She only knew that certain things wanted to be found, and certain places, the cracks beneath the boards, the hollow beneath the ledge, must be kept closed by hands willing to stay awake and by the tiny, stubborn acts of remembering. When she turned to go, the attic hatch clicked softly shut on its own. For a moment she thought she heard a voice, not threatening, not friendly, but older than either. It said, almost kindly, "Don't forget us." Claire folded her coat around her and went out into the morning. The gulls stitched the sky like scattered stitches. The trunk was heavy in the trunk of her car. As she drove away from Ledge Road, the fog fell back like a curtain, and the house hunched its shoulders in the clearing light. She did not turn to look at the attic window. Some things, she had learned that night, were better left as names on a folded bit of paper. She drove until the town was small behind her. And when she called in months later to say the house had been sold, she left unsaid the true cost of the sale. A promise pressed flat between wood and binding, a stone wrapped in oilcloth, and a hollow beneath the ledge that would have to be tended again someday by someone who would remember.